Hey guys, welcome back to the workshop. It's Wes from Animation Toolkit, and today we're going to get stuck straight into an Anibild 3 build. Okay, let's get stuck straight in. So here's a packed fresh Anibild 3, need one of those. There's some simple tools, some modelling pliers. I've got two pairs of modelling pliers here. They need to have noses on the end, they can't be end cutters or side cutters, they do need a bit of a nose. I've got some tape. This is electrician's tape, it could be masking tape. We've got some thread lock. This is Z71 thread locker from Animation Toolkit as well. You can purchase that from us, or if you're going to purchase a thread locker online, then just make sure it's a permanent thread locker. It's usually red, as this one denominates, it's red. And also you're going to need a little bit of tissue. So they're the basic tools. There's also some tools in the box. So let's first and foremost, let's crack open the box. Let's see what we've got. So some wire, all the parts and some instructions. A bit of silica, we don't need that. This keeps everything dry. I'm just going to break out the instructions. Okay, brilliant. So I think because I know it so well, I'm going to talk you through it and not refer to the instructions heavily, but I'm just going to keep them on the side just as a reference for me. I'm going to break open the pack and just double check that there's everything there. So bear with me, this could take a while. Make sure you don't lose any of the pieces like I have just done. So we're going to follow the instructions on this side like so, and just make sure that everything's there. So chest plate, followed by a hip ring. We've got our feet and our toes, a variety of tools to help us lock everything in. That's very useful for us. And then a variety of bars. So I'm just going to speed through this quickly and count up all of the pieces. Okay, we've got everything ready to go and start the Anibild 3 build. There's a few whys and wherefores in this I'm going to talk you through. It's essential that everything is clean. We do clean everything ahead of it being sent out, but if you do find that any parts have missed our cleaning process, then it might be wise just to dump them in some acetone or some spirits of some kind, just to make sure that they're super shiny and clean, and that just gives the thread lock a better chance of forming this chemical reaction that we need to stick these parts together. So ahead of us starting, all I'm going to do is take our two pairs of pliers. Now this is a really important step. I'm going to take some electrical tape and I'm going to wrap the electrical tape around the teeth of the pliers. Now this isn't for better grip, although it does help, but what it's doing is we're going to use these pliers to tighten those balls onto the bar and tighten the bar into the joints. Now wrapping the teeth in tape as we're doing just like this, make sure that none of the balls or the bars get scratched. The balls are the most important thing not to scratch, because we don't want to impede any of the movement of the ball when they're situated within the joint. So there we go. So wrapped the jaws of two pairs of pliers in electrical tape. So that first and foremost, that's really important for us to do. So that's done. I'm going to move all of the parts out of the way so they're in arm's reach, and I'm going to start with the T-bones. So I'm just going to very carefully, without losing a load of bits, Slide everything to the side. Okay, so I broke out the thread locker. That's really important. We're going to start with that, and then we're going to start with the lower hip T-bone. So I'm just going to give it a quick wipe there. Now, the thread locker is really important that we use this, and it's not like super glue. Thread locker works on the basis that on a chemical reaction basis, which means that when it touches the metal, the two types of metal, it starts a chemical reaction. And this can be quite messy, so make sure that you've got plenty of tissue to hand just to wipe anything off. So we've got a bit of thread locker in the first thread, which is the bottom thread, and we're going to take a 25mm stud, and we're also going to just coat this in plenty of thread locker too, just like this, and that's going to screw. I'm just going to hand screw these for now just into there. And then on the other side, I'm going to do exactly the same. Screw that into there. Okay, so we've got the start of the hips. Now I'm going to take my pliers that are wrapped in the tape, and I'm just going to very gently wind these in equally either side, just like so. So each of those 25mm bars is going to screw into the lower T-bone, which is the hip joint, by about 5mm. Wipe away any excess, just like so. We don't want that getting everywhere. I'm just going to come back to those and just very, very gently nip them up. When I say nip them up, I don't want you to over tighten these. It's just important that they are tight. The pressure that those threads cause with the thread lock actually engages a chemical reaction from the thread locker, and with a little bit of warmth, the thread locker will start expanding as it reacts to the two metals, and then that thread locker will solidify and lock those pieces permanently into place. So there's the hip, and I'm going to repeat the process now. With what's going to be the lowest spine, and as you can see, I'm just hand winding that into position, wiping away any excess, and then I'm going to very gently just nip that up until it's tight. I don't want to over tighten it and pull any of those threads. It's just enough, as I say, to start that chemical reaction between the two metals. Now I'm going to take the balls that we need. So there's two 6mm balls and one 9mm ball. So first and foremost, the 9mm ball, applying the thread lock to the lower back, and then also applying the thread lock into the thread that's in the ball. And very carefully just screw that into position, just like so. Now I'm winding it back and forward just like this to make sure that that thread is completely coated with the thread lock. Okay, and that is finger tight. Wiping away any excess. And then taking the pliers and then just very, very gently nipping it up, not over tightening. So there we go. You guys might choose to wear gloves to do this if you're not too keen on getting the thread locker, or if you've got sensitive skin, then the thread locker might cause an irritation. Now for the hips themselves, the actual hip ball joint. So we've put thread locker onto the 25mm ball and also into the 25mm ball thread. Sorry, the thread locker onto the 25mm bone bar, and then again just screwing that back and forth, making sure that the thread locker works its way in totally to the thread. Then just tightening up just like that, and then the same on the other side. And into the thread of the ball. Just like so. There we go. So I'm confident there's plenty of thread locker down both the male and female parts of the thread. Wiped away any excess, and then I'm going to take our pliers again that have been wrapped in the tape, and this is the important thing. We don't want to scratch those balls at all. I'm just going to use them to nip them onto the bar. One, on the other side. Two, so not over tightening at all, just making sure that they've nipped up, and again causing that chemical reaction from the thread locker between the two pieces of metal. Okay, so the torso is almost complete, but whilst we're here, I'm just going to take the hip ring and find these two stainless steel 5mm nuts, and we're just going to line up the holes like so. Find the correct Allen key, which is this one, and we're just going to screw these into place. Now you don't need to use thread locker on these because they're not a moving part. So first one's in, and the second one like so, also in. Okay, so that is the hip section for our armature. I'm going to put that aside for now. Next we're going to jump into the actual torso, so we're going to need another one of our T-bones. Now this T-bone takes 5 of the 25mm bars. The first of which makes the upper portion of the backbone. So take the 25mm stud. I've covered both threads with the thread locker, and I'm just going to hand wind that into position. They can be a little bit stiff. Some of these threaded cuts can be stiff, so just wind it in gently. Just working it back and forth, making sure that plenty of that thread lock has gone into the threads, and then I'm taking it to a position where I can just nip it up. So just, there's a bit more on that. Just there. Cleaning away any excess. Okay, brilliant. And then the same for your shoulders. So let's get 2 more 25mm balls. 25mm studs, excuse me. I'll work one in like so. And then I'm going to work in the next. Going to give those a little nip. Really careful there not to touch the actual threaded end of the stud. There we go, just a little nip on both, and then wiping away any excess. There we go, nice and clean. And then lastly, what becomes the neck, or the upper spine. Hang on, I forgot to put thread lock on this thread. Don't miss the thread lock. Okay, so that one wounds in quite easily too. And then just a little nip just there, like so. Cool. Now for the next step, we're going to need 3 balls. There's 6mm and 1 9mm ball. I'm going to start with the 9mm, and I'm just going to add the thread lock to that one. And whilst I'm here, because they're all facing up, I'm just going to add the thread lock to each of those 6mm as well. And then round the first thread, which is the upper spine. Working that 9mm ball into position, making sure it's up and down that thread, making sure there's plenty of thread lock again. So it's finger tight and clean. And then the same for shoulder 1, which is the left or right, we don't know yet. And then number 2, this is the lower neck, just like so. Number 3, which is the opposite shoulder, left or right, we don't know yet. Oops. Okay. Now that one is a little bit sticky because the thread seems to be a little bit coarse. It's going. Okay, it just needs a little bit of teasing into position. There we go, one down. Next one, and then the last one. Just like so. And then we can clean everything up, make sure there's no residue, and obviously give your hands a clean. I mentioned before you might choose to wear gloves if you do have skin allergies. This stuff might trigger it. Okay, right. At this point, we're actually ready to attach the chest piece. So you're going to take the chest plate and then 2 of the stainless steel nuts. Where have they gone? There we go. There's 1 and 2. As I say, it's not necessary to put thread lock onto these. You can do if you choose. So the first one goes in. I'm grabbing the chest piece pretty tight to wind these in. There we go. Okay, so I hope you're following along so far. We just completed the torso and the hips. I'm going to grab those 2 pieces now. We're handheld, and I'm moving out of our studio, and I'm just walking into the workshop with the 2 pieces, and I'm going to place those 2 pieces that we've just made onto quite a warm radiator, as you can see. Okay, so I've left those two pieces on the radiator to bake. That's a really important part of this process, because the thread locker that we're using, it's a bit of science. It really needs a bit of heat to help the chemical reaction between the two pieces of metal and the thread lock to really activate. And once it's activated, it will start to expand between the two threads that have been joined together, expand and solidify. So I'm going to leave them on the radiator for as long as 12 hours. Okay, let's crack on. Let's get stuck into the legs. So for this bit, we're going to need 2 of the single ball joints. I'm just going to repeat the process that we did last time. So dab a thread locker into the hole, into the thread, and then taking a 50mm bone bar this time, and then just covering both ends of the thread with the thread lock. And then I'm going to just finger tight those into position, wind them back and forth just like so. Just to make sure that all of the teeth on those threads are covered in the thread locker, and then just tighten them up like this. Wipe away any excess. Now these are slightly tricky in the sense that the joints need to be opposing. They need to operate in different ways. So one needs the flat, and then the other one needs to be in this position. But I'm going to do that with a pair of pliers. So they're finger tight at the moment. This time take both pairs of pliers, hold both ends of the joints, and then just wind them up until they are fairly tight into position, just like that. So as I say, the joints are opposed. One faces up and one faces to the side. And we're going to repeat that process for the next set. Okay, so that's our 2 legs complete. Now make sure that the joints are opposed. So the 90. Okay, that's our 2 thigh bones complete. So just make sure that both joints on either top end and bottom end of the thigh bone, one point up and then one point out to the side. So they're 90 degrees opposed to each other basically. I'm going to set those aside, and then I'm going to jump onto the lower leg. So for this, another 2 50mm ball joints, and again the 2 6mm ball joints. I'm just going to drop a dab of thread lock into those threads. Like always, just work that in back and forth until all of the threads are coated in the thread lock. You can actually see that it does go deep inside the joint, and that's really important. Okay, so that's finger tight. Wipe off any excess, and then the same with this one. Now, before I tighten those up with the pliers, I'm just going to drop on 2 6mm balls. One. Two. Now, using the pliers, I'm going to grab that ball and just nip everything into position, just like this. So I'm going to start with the bar, nip that up until it's tight, and then with the ball do exactly the same. Can get quite slippy with an excess of thread lock. There we go. So I don't want to hold it too tight either, because I'm trying my best not to scratch that ball at all. Okay, I think that's it. Oh yes. Nice and tight on the first, and then we'll do the second. Lower leg, just nip that into the joint and then grab the ball and do exactly the same. Here we go. Nice. Bro. There's our 2 lower legs. Fab. Put those aside for now. We're just going to move on to the upper arm. So again, just repeating the process. 2 6mm single ball joints and 2 50mm bone bar. This YouTube film is designed as a follow along, but obviously you can stop and pause, rewind, fast forward. I think a lot of this is quite explanatory, but it's funny though, because if you've never done it before, then I suppose it's all quite alien. With a little bit of experience and a little bit of time, we can usually knock these armatures together in about 40 minutes or so. I think our record in studio is about 25 minutes if I'm honest. And then the last 2 single ball joints, I'm going to do exactly the same. Oops, don't forget the thread lock. Okay, everything's just finger tight on that one. Nip it up in a minute. Wiping away any excess. Similar to the thigh bones, the two joints should be opposed, so they should point in opposite directions. So I'm just going to wind these up so they actually do that. There's the first. And then number two. Just need to make sure that it is actually pointing the opposite way, so it's still got 180 degrees to turn, which we can do. I think there's enough thread in these. It does feel tight. That's okay. There we go. Maybe a little bit too much in that one, so I'm just gonna very slightly release that. There we go. No, we've made them the same way. So bear with me. Let's undo that. I'm just gonna. So the key there is obviously I've made a little bit mistake, but take your time. I mean, once the thread locker goes off, once it goes off, it is pretty hard to undo. So where are we now? So if we just nip this one up. So we want to be right the way over there, don't we? So okay, great, we're good to go. So I'm going to put those aside and now just jump in quickly to do the forearms, which are easy enough. So 4 of the 6mm balls, just like this. Let's start with the first one, just like this. And second. Okay, one. Again, just using the pliers, I'm just going to very quickly nip these up. There we go. There we go. You'll find over time with these pliers as well, and the tape that's around the teeth, that the balls will start making a nice little tidy indent into a place in the teeth. If you start seeing the teeth through the tape, then just wrap them in another layer. 2 forearms. Let's put those aside. Now let's move on to the feet. Okay, so fish out the feet and the parts from your pile of bits. You're going to need 2 of these 10mm studs and 2 more 6mm balls, just like so. It's a fairly easy one, this really. There's a little trick to doing them though. So again, in with the thread locker into the thread of the foot. And then I'm going to take one of these and drop the 10mm stud finger tight into the hole. I'm not going to use any pliers on it yet, and you'll see why in a second. I'm going to do exactly the same with the right foot. In like so. And then again with the 6mm balls. Finger tight onto the thread. Now I'm going to take my pliers and we're going to use the pliers to screw the ball onto the stud, which in turn, as that tightens, will tighten the stud into the boss of the foot. So effectively tighten everything up at the same time. Nip it up. That's our first. And then the same with the left. Just using the pliers to tighten the ball onto the stud, which in turn turns that stud into the boss of the left foot, the ankle. There we go. And whilst we're here, we might as well just put the toes on. So, toes and screws. 1. I've lost a screw. There we go. 2 screws. These are sided left and right, so just make sure that the foot does actually fit. So that's wrong, so that's the left toe. And this is the right toe. And then taking your Allen key, you're going to come in from the outside of the right foot and screw it in to the inner side of the foot. Just like so. These can be a little bit tight, which is good. We want tight, tight's good. There we go. Then you'll see initially they can be quite loose, but all we need to do is just nip that hinge up on the joint. There we go. It's already starting to get a bit of tension. Yeah, plenty of tension in there. Then the same with the left foot. So here's my left foot. I'm going to go with the screw from the outside onto the inside. Use the Allen key to wind it in and tighten up. go. So there's already tension there. Just finding the bite. You don't want to over tighten the toe screws at all. You don't want to pull the thread that's on the inside of either of those feet because you'll have no tension in those toes at all. But again, you know, they will hold the position quite easily. Right, now they're done, I'm just going to put those aside. Give ourselves a bit of a clean up. We're not far from main assembly. So now we're going to make dumbbells. So we need 2 of the 10mm studs and 4 of the 6mm balls. Just drop those onto their backs. Okay. This is where it gets a little bit tricky because these parts are getting quite small now. There we go. There's one. Two. Just clean them off. It's one dumbbell. Eek. Just take your time threading these threads into place. You don't want to cross thread them. That's not great. Once you start cross threading, especially on components that are this small, you'll find that there's a point of no return and they'll never go back together properly. So just using your fingers to gently screw everything together is the main thing. So there you go. And then just grabbing my 2 pairs of pliers, just going to very gently nip these up. So it's a nip. There's one, and I feel as if I've lost a little bit of tape on that jaw, so I'm just going to put a bit more tape. Yeah, I've lost a bit of tape on the jaws. The tape obviously helps purchase the ball a lot easier as well, so I'm just going to try that again. There's one. And the second one. There you go. Brilliant. 2 dumbbells. So lastly, all we need to do is assemble the hand carpal. So the hand carpal is this piece. So this piece represents this part of your hand. So all we need to do is make a stem that comes down from the carpal of your hand all the way to the wrist. And we do that by grabbing the 2 carpal pieces. Again, take a couple of 10mm studs and a couple of balls. Now, let's turn those onto their back. Apply some thread lock, yes, and thread lock, and then thread lock into both of these. Now these are a little bit trickier than usual. Just going to drop some thread lock onto the stud first and foremost and get the ball on. Just get those hand tight, just like so. one. The second one. Now, I'm going to purchase the middle. You can see that the middle part of the stud, purchase that with the finer end of the teeth of the pliers. I'm just going to use the other pliers just to nip that up. And do the same on this one, like so. Okay. Now use those to hand screw. Let's get a little bit more of the thread lock. Hand screw into the carpals. Now the carpals don't really move. There's no joint tension in a hand carpal, so the thread lock, and it has its reaction in there as it expands into the joint, should be enough. And this one too. One. Oops. Bang that into there, like so. Just finger tight. So, let me show you this. So it's flush. If you can just see that, it's flush with the top of the hand carpal. So, they're both flush. They seem a little bit loose at the moment, but the thread lock will solidify over the course of a few hours and we will be able to get some wire in those to make the fingers. So what I'm going to do now, like we did with the torso and the hip pieces, I'm going to take all of these pieces and I'm going to go and take them over to the heater, and I'm going to let them warm through on the heater for about 12 hours. Okay, we're back. My parts have been baking for more than 12 hours or so. I've actually been home and come back. I left them in the studio. I'd seriously advise you to do the same. The longer they've got, the better chance that the Loctite has got, or the thread lock has got to cure. So let's put these aside for a minute and pick out our hand carpals. These are these. Let's start with wiring these before we do a final assembly. So take the aluminium wire. This is 1mm aluminium wire. Just unthread it. So for each carpal, we're going to need approximately 5 lengths of 10cm wire. Ish, you know, it's quite rough. There's plenty on these reels to do them more than once. So if you muck up the first time, don't worry. There's 4. There's 5. I'm going to take the carpal and I'm going to take 2 of these strands and I'm going to bend them halfway. I'm going to make that bend quite tight. You'll see why in a minute. But use my fingers just to tighten up that little bend. Just like that. I'm going to take the carpal and I'm going to thread these finger wires from the bottom, so where the ball is, from the bottom outwards. So through the first 2 holes, there's 1, and then through, there we go. They look a little bit like hairpins, these, I suppose. Through the next 2 wires, and then all of a sudden, you'll see that we have 4 fingers. Quite loose at the moment, don't worry. They're going to tighten up in a minute. I'm going to take another wire. This is going to be my thumb, and I'm going to bend that like so. So it's another hairpin. And I'm going to twist these 2 legs, which have become the first finger, together. Hand twisting them like this. Okay, so there we have our first finger. Let's hold it like this so you can see it. So you can see it starting to come together. Now the next wire is going to be our thumb wire. So I'm going to take these two legs of aluminium wire, hand twist them together, and this becomes our thumb. There we go. And then very carefully I'm going to bend this round the back of the hand carpal and up. And this is going to be our pinky. There we go. So we're almost there, as you can see already. Fairly quick process. Then our last leg of aluminium wire, I'm going to bend in the middle, position between the third finger and the index finger. Move these out of the way and just carefully twist these together. Like one and two. I'm hand winding these with my hands, not using any tools. I don't want to nick them. I don't want to cause the aluminium to break in any places. Hand winding them is enough, and getting them finger tight like this will really wind the aluminium tight into the hand carpal. So there we have it. Now this thumb is slightly out of place, and all we need to do is just bend it down and back up again. There we go. And there we have our thumb. They're all a little bit long, so I'm just gonna quickly clip these to no particular size. You can spend a little bit more time making sure that your hands and fingers are cut to the correct size and dimensions of the character that you need. You can do that right at the end. There's no immediate rush to start clipping those fingers. You can leave them long for now, but there you go. And I'm literally going to repeat that again. So here is one I made earlier. There's two sets, and notice that this thumb is annoyingly long, so just gonna clip that out. So our two hands are ready, and we are now ready for final assembly. So let's clear the decks. First and foremost, the most exciting bit, we're going to attach the torso together. So that's the hips and the shoulders. So we're going to take this M4 screw, and it's the biggest of all the screws that are provided in the pack, and it needs to go through the clearance hole in the 9mm joint, and then that screws into the tap on the other side quite easily. Again, just use my fingers to get that in roughly. I'm going to hold them together like so. Use the biggest of the Allen wrenches and just tighten them up like that. There we go, look. It's coming together. I'm going to set that aside for a minute, and then I'm just going to set up all of these 6mm single ball joints. So basically, just, you don't want these to be tight, you just want to roughly assemble them using your fingers, putting the female part of the joint onto the 6mm ball joint. There we go. Find a lower leg, and we grab one of the 6mm single ball joints on a 50mm bar, but with the ball on the end, and we attach it to the ankle. There's one. I'm not going super tight on these ball joints at the moment because I'm going to save the tensioning for later. Where are we? So on this one, You see me jump through a couple of selections there. I've made sure that the nuts on the outside of the hex cap is on the outside, and this cap is on the back of the armature. So we'll need that in a second. There's one leg. Let's do the same for this. It's just general practice for me, really. I always make sure that the hex caps, these are the caps of the screws that we use these hex wrenches in, always sit on the outside of the puppet. So that's the left shoe. So that cap sits out, points outwards. And then take one of these. Again, that hex cap at the knee is facing outwards, and the hex cap is at the back of his butt cheek, basically. So there's the two legs ready to go. And let's just very quickly assemble the arms. So forearm connects to the elbow like this, and then taking our 6mm double ball joints like this, hand assemble to begin with. There's one. There goes another. Let's take our hands. There's one hand, and that becomes a wrist joint. Make sure it's in. That's it. Now, keeping with tradition, making sure that all of the hex caps are pointing outwards. There's one hand. And there we go. Well, fab. Let's get this baby together. Might have to go a bit wider on this shot. It's also, oh, there we go. So what have we got here? Left leg. Left leg goes on. Right leg goes on. There we go. Still not tensioned up, just roughly getting everything into place really before we start applying any tension. So there we go. And then let's get those. These are our shoulder joints. Oh, with the dumbbell, so get the dumbbell in there first. Screw it out. Right arm. Go. Let's get the left arm in. Shoulder joints in. Now, what did we forget to glue up? So we find that we've got one 25mm bar left and one ball left. You might find in your kit you've got a few more spare parts. It's not uncommon, we do throw spare parts in, as we've got a couple of balls left over, a piece of 10mm stud and a spare screw. I'm just gonna, this is my neck joint, I'm just gonna thread that into there like so. Okay, final piece goes in just there. And neck joints obviously can be connected to a head of your choice, but there you have it. There's our Anibild 3, complete. There he is. Well, that was it. That was the build. And there's our Anibild 3. Quite chuffed with that. Thanks for joining us today at Animation Toolkit and doing the A3 build. I hope you found it useful. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, that is all, folks. We'll see you on the next one.